the other thing is like when you buy a course, how many courses have we bought that we never finish, or books that we never finish? Because we feel the stress to do something. We go buy the course and we think, okay, I've got the course now, I'm cool. But most people don't finish the courses, it's like a 3% or whatever, So when we look at what our motivation is, to your point, if it's an internal validation, open-ended, like growth, like contribution, like whatever, you can never actually reach an upper limit because you will always be you can, because you can think you're working towards it, but in fact, if you're really working towards it, you will always be growing.
Sure. Welcome to another episode of the TPM Show. Today is a very special episode. I've got three amazing guests with me. I am your host, Tim Matthews, with the amazing Mr. Arthur Miglianiti, world champ, although that nickname is now changed to
The Keeper.
The Keeper, and
The Gift.
So we're just off the back of the Alpha Rising, which is a sequel to the Alpha Reset. And I wanted to pull these guys in because you guys have been in the movement a few years, around
2.5, yeah.
Yep. So you guys have been through some incredible growth. And there was a topic that came up for you. I can't remember which day it was on the Rising, but it was the idea of upper limits. And I think there's a lot of guys that, if we explain what an upper limit is, how it shows up, I think that's the first thing, and talk about ways and strategies to overcome it, I think there's going to be a lot of guys that resonate with it, because I believe a lot of guys bounce off this upper limit, this upper ceiling, without even realizing they're doing it. So let's talk a little bit about that and see if we can bring some insight, some value to the guys.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Sounds good.
How would you describe upper limiting, Arthur?
So the way I go about describing it is that we all have this identity of who we are in the world. And a lot of it is self-imposed. Most of it is self-imposed. But within that structure, we limit ourselves, right? So, for example, you could call yourself a small businessman, right? And automatically, I mean, that's a generic term that a lot of people use, millions of people use. I'm a small businessman, I'm not a corporate or anything else. But the minute you put that identity on you, small businessman, that can be limiting in itself, right? And so there are identities that we take on, names or labels, that automatically start limiting ourselves because we live through that. And we don't do it consciously, of course. No one wants to be a small businessman all their life or all their working life. But in that instance, that can happen. I also think there's another way to look at this, and that is sort of our internal thermostat, our self-identity within, like, what am I capable of doing? We see it obvious in growth. People come and they work and they do, and then they grow as as individuals, and then they get to a stage. We talk about it. After the activation method, you've reached a platform, not a plateau. A lot of guys think, oh, that's it. That's it. And they don't want to, or they don't see the need to push forward, or they don't realize that the need to push forward. But that in itself can be a limiting upper limit, as you say. So I think there's labels we adopt, and there's just our internal conditioning that also creates these upper limits that, I'm getting a little bit too big for myself, for my thermostat, wherever that thermostat setting in our minds. And then that can actually create a sort of resistance to us moving forward, but also sometimes pushes us down. All right, so we create something to blow up the situation because now we're in uncomfortable territory. We want to go back to that comfortable territory and carry on sort of surfing along that.
Yeah, I think probably the easiest way to describe that one is like lottery winners, right?
Yeah.
Win a ton of money, lose it all within a year, because the internal thermostat is set to being broke, right? So it's uncomfortable having money. So it unsettles them. I think there's one other thing I'd add to that as well is I think a piece of upper limiting is how somebody's nervous system can become wired too. It's a different kind of angle rather than identity and the thermostat, which I think are great ones. But if my nervous system has become wired for chaos, right? Because I've been going through a certain season of my life, be it building a business, be it raising a young family, whatever it may be. And then I enter into a period where I've got more space. Maybe I've built my business and it doesn't really need me. So I've got space, or the kids no longer demand as much from me. So again, I have space. That space can create angst, because if somebody's used to being busy and are literally wired neurologically and biochemically to be in this fight or flight state, they're going to find ways to create the chaos, recreate really the chaos, so that they can then go and operate in that way. And they may do this through having a savior complex, right? You know, we've had a lot of guys say to us how they resonate with the idea that, okay, I'm going to build it up. It's going to go really well. And then it doesn't need me. And then I'm going to start to meddle, and it's going to come crashing down so I can build it back up again. Because when I build it back up, that's when I get all the accolades. That's where I get my significance. That's where I begin really feeling good again, because the spaciousness is too difficult for them to handle, because they're not getting the significance and the other things as well. I'm curious, Austin, what's your experience with upper limits? Do you know much about it? Have you seen it play out in your life?
I definitely have experienced it quite often. You know, I think for the first time this weekend, it was really brought to light for me. And I'm glad hearing your guys' like definition of it, because that even just drives it home further for me. You know, but one area that it always starts with for me has been fitness. It's always been something where like I can get in shape and do like a P90X program back, 10 years ago. I mean, it starts all the way back then where I got in the best shape of my life, and then upper limit happens and I just go right back, and I'm almost back to where I was 90 days later, because I just fall back to those old habits, poor eating, sitting at a desk all day or whatever it may be. And I've definitely like gone past certain limits, but it always just like, even in that next area of like greatness for me, I still hit another upper limit. And it's almost like a repeat loop of that, where I can be in the best shape of my life. And then, but to some degree, some of that seasons though, where like you just have a busy season, like that'd be kind of my pushback on that too, is, I think there's another area for me to go in fitness as far as like growth, to look like this guy right here.
You mean this guy from 20 years ago?
But you know what I mean? Like for me, I feel like I just like, I get complacent almost, and I maybe make the excuse that it's the season. I don't know. It's a little bit of both for me.
It's easy to do as well, right? Because that's the thing with upper limits. There's often
you make excuses for yourself.
Well, yeah, and especially with you guys are very smart guys. A lot of the listeners are very intelligent men. So therefore, the excuses and the stories you also tell yourself are very intelligent. So they're very believable. So yeah, it is important to be able to find the truth within the upper limit, right? Is it a season? Is it a pattern? My question, I guess my pushback rather than question, would be if it's a pattern, then I'd argue that maybe it's not a season, because if there's a pattern of this happening throughout your life over a period of time, then is it really the season, or is this just kind of part of the pattern of being stuck in this upper limit?
Yeah, I would say fitness for me, it's more of a pattern.
I agree with that for myself. And on the fitness level, I mean, I was in incredible shape in my late 20s, and then I just, boom, stopped. Didn't work out for 6 years, got fat, lost a lot of muscle. Then I jumped back in, got into pretty damn good shape again, and boom, stopped. Haven't lifted for 14 years now. Now I'm just starting again. So why do I do that to myself? Why, am I ever going to go back to that level? I don't need to. But what's resonating more with me about this conversation, in a sense, is thinking about people even coming through in the activation method, and then they say, "Oh no, I'm good now," and then they go and they think they go off and they think they know everything. Realize, oh shoot, I don't know it all yet. And now, after being in it for a long time, you realize like this journey never ends. This is a continual journey, and you have to, self-growth. You have to keep going, or you're going to fall back harder than you were when you started. So it's really interesting.
I think a degree of complacency sets in, like automatically for me, where it's like you get to that point of like, oh, I fixed my marriage, or oh, I got fit, or oh, my business is good, and then complacency sets in.
Sure.
And that's where like the upper limit is like. Your mind is telling yourself like it's good now, but then
even outside of this movement, right? So like for me, I know personally when I did activation method, I took a break. I just thought I thought I was good, and then months later I jumped back into the brotherhood. I know I'm never stopping now, but you see other people who have trauma and they deal with things and they say, oh, no, I'm good now. I dealt with that. I talked to psychiatrists for 2 years. Like, it doesn't work that way. Right? I don't think it works that way.
The thing that comes up for me as you guys are talking, which I love hearing you guys bounce back and forth, is what's the reason why you're doing something? All right. If you're doing something for external validation, get in shape, to look good, to attract women, to whatever it may be, or to build a business, or whatever you want to look at. If it's for external validation, so to get the validation of something outside of you, whether it's a woman, whether it's your family, whether it's an award, whatever it may be, parents' approval, whatever, right?
Hey guys, sorry to interrupt this episode, but the reality is if you are watching or listening to this right now, then you are looking to better yourself. And I applaud you. You're one of my people. And I want to give you the opportunity of taking massive action. So if you haven't joined the activation method yet, it's our flagship program. Do what thousands of other businessmen just like you have done and take action. Be one of the 1%ers that actually does the work and takes action. There'll be a link in the description that'll take you right to a page that'll just give you more information. There is no obligation. Just go check it out and see if it's a good fit for you. All right, let's get back to this episode.
Then that's a big piece of where the upper limit's going to come in. Because if you're motivated thinking that, hey, I'm going to do this thing, and then when I get the thing, I'm then going to just have do be essentially. I'm then going to feel good enough for whatever the thing may be. And you don't get it, it's not, well, what's the point? I may as well just stop. So internal versus external validation is really important. Whereas if you're doing it for you, to Arthur's point, based on your identity and who you see yourself to be.
Yeah.
So personally for me, one of my values is growth.
Yeah.
So for me to not grow, that would be out of alignment with how I see myself. It would be against my value system. Yeah.
Yeah.
Integrity is another piece of my value system. So for me to be out of integrity with myself, I can't imagine myself doing either of those two things. Because again, to Arthur's point, that's how I see myself. That is my identity. Therefore, I can't ever see myself experiencing an upper limit within my growth or my integrity, because it's who I am. You were gonna say something?
Yeah, I love what you're saying, and I agree completely with that. The point I was going to make early on was the fact that we often feel a stress in our lives to do something, to fix something, right? And then we step up into that, like you might have had say it was a girl, or say it was a competition or whatever. You looking for that external validation. There's a stress there that you got to attend to, right?
Yeah.
And then you get it, stress dissipates, and you think, okay, it's fixed, it's done, all right? But that's the external validation, right? The other thing is like when you buy a course, how many courses have we bought that we never finish, or books that we never finish? Because we feel the stress to do something. We go buy the course and we think, okay, I've got the course now, I'm cool. But most people don't finish the courses, it's like a 3% or whatever, So when we look at what our motivation is, to your point, if it's an internal validation, open-ended, like growth, like contribution, like whatever, you can never actually reach an upper limit, because you will always be you can, because you can think you're working towards it, but in fact, if you're really working towards it, you will always be growing.
Sure.
The way that one way to ensure that you're doing that is to obviously surround yourself with the right kind of people.
That's what I was going to say, yeah.
Because then you can't bullshit yourself.
Yeah.
You always got, and we've all heard the saying, the 5 people you spend the most time with, and all of that. If you're broke and you want to become wealthy, go sit with 5 wealthy people most of the time. Yeah. Or if you're a millionaire, you want to become a billionaire, go sit with 5 billionaires for a while. Yeah. Right? You'll adopt the consciousness and the thinking of the people that you spend the most time with. That works in reverse too. Yeah. If you go sit with 5 unhealthy people, guess what? After a while, you're going to have those unhealthy habits as well, because their standards are different. And I guess this is another part of this conversation is your standards. You change your standards, you raise your standards, you change your life. And so that feeds into this outside eyes in. Who's watching you? Who's feeding back to you? Who's helping you keep accountable so we don't believe, the lies that we create, as well as what are the standards that we employ to keep us leveling up continuously without falling back.
Yeah, Tim hit it right on the head, though, with the values and the vision. If you don't have a path forward, you're just doing something. There's no end goal to it, right?
Yeah.
So if I said I was going to get down to 12% body fat, I get there. Okay, what do I do now? Do I just go to 20 next week? Because you could do that, but you have to have a long-term vision. No, it's maintaining that. It's being healthy. It's, so it's interesting.
I love what you're talking about with the stress too, because what came for me is the idea of being pushed by pain versus pulled by pleasure. If you're forever pushed by pain, that means you're motivated to move away from pain, to move away from something. So the idea of somebody who was broke as a child, who said, I'm never going to be broke again. So many athletes and rich people talk about this, right? Yeah. Hey, I'm never going to be broke again. So they're driven and driven and driven and driven. Yet no matter how much they have, they always feel broke. Mm-hmm. Because they're constantly driven by the pain of not being broke. So they're always going and going and going. Whereas it's totally possible, by doing a bit of work on yourself, in fairness, but to be pulled by pleasure. Being pulled by pleasure means being consciously choosing where you want to go and giving yourself permission to be pulled by something that excites you, that you really want, that you're consciously choosing. Right? It's a very different energy to come from. And when you're pushed by pain, it's far easier to up a limit than when you're pulled by pleasure. Because pushed by pain means typically that you're unconsciously driven. Yes, somebody that's been broke, that's driven to be rich, may understand that they've been broke, but they don't typically don't understand the unconscious story that they are telling themselves that's driving them to move away from the pain. Because if they did understand it, they'd stop saying it. Because they always, we know people, right, that are very wealthy, yet feel broke a lot of the time. And regardless of how much money they have in the bank, could be 10 million, 20 million, whatever, they won't buy themselves a new pair of Ray-Bans or even underwear.
Yeah,
right?
Or trainers.
Trainers. Yeah. Because they're in fear of money. So, who's more broke? The guy that has 20 million in the bank and lives that way, or the guy that's got no money in the bank but isn't living in fear?
Yeah.
I just have to say, for the people listening, trainers means sneakers in the American world. I just learned that yesterday.
So let's leave the listeners with some action steps here. So let's say someone's resonating with this, right? Let's say you were listening to this a week ago and you're resonating with it, and we want to give the guys some action steps on what they can do. Let's go for one each to be able to break through this upper limit.
I would say, hitting it with the values, right? Where if you're going to be actionable and be pulled by pleasure, having a sense of values for what you represent, what you want your life to be about, is a good place to start. I have like a vision statement for life, obviously, and I think many of the men do in the movement, especially after being through the activation method and whatnot. But I use the EOS structure, which is like the VTO. I actually have that for a personal, and I've gone through faith, love, freedom, leadership, and joy. And the freedom aspect for me is kind of like that abundance of time, energy, and money. And so that energy, I kind of tie that freedom to also being fit. So for me, and I think one of the things that I realized this weekend was that I wasn't playing all out on my values. And so that, like, going back to even, love and that component of me giving my time more to my family instead of to my business. I feel like I've been opposite ever since, some of the business things that I've been involved in over the last 1.5 years, 2 years. And just getting back to that foundation, I feel like that I could contribute to being a season, right? And just noticing that instead of it being an upper limit, that was a season of busyness for me. But now that season's kind of like, okay, the dust is settled. Now it's like this weekend I was like, damn, I just need to get back to my values. And if I didn't have values to base that off of, I would still be wondering, who the fuck am I?
I love that.
Yeah, I guess, I would say I would use the word vision, but I think if you have a strong vision of what you want, and I think the question, what's coming up for me is the why. So you have a goal that you want to achieve, what's the why behind it? Are you just doing it because someone else said you should do it? Because you're never going to put everything into it. I think you have to have a strong why, saying, well, I need to do this because if I don't do this, I'm so unhealthy that I could possibly, have health issues and, whatever. So there has to be a very strong why for you to commit to it and do it and keep doing it. Otherwise, you'll hit that upper limit and you say, okay, I did it because it wasn't for me. I didn't truly believe it, right? So I think there's something to really feeling it from the heart that
I would say another component of the why is like the passion behind it. Like you have to feel it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you don't have passion, you're just going through the motions, right? You're gonna do it for a little bit and okay,
And I think having the passion is where you're pulled by the pleasure.
I love that.
Yeah.
What about you, Arthur?
Yeah, I think getting really, really clear what is true for you, being authentic with yourself. A lot of times we chase goals either because we think that's what we should get or we shouldn't. They're going to limit us anyway because we're not really committed to those goals. We'll run down the highway, chasing them for years and then suddenly realize, actually, that's not my goal. So getting really clear on what, and I suppose it connects with the values that you guys are talking about. It's authentic goals, being clear on those goals, as well as surround yourself with the right people who are going or are where you want to go.
Wow, it's tough to go fourth. You guys have gave 3 great ones. I'd like to say you've stolen all mine. Yeah, I was going to say environment as well. I'm thinking of somebody who's listening to this, resonating with the idea of bouncing off upper limits. What can they do? Well, the first thing is get themselves in a different environment where they're going to be around people that have what they have. Obviously, you got to resonate with the people. I think it's more than just them having what you have, but environment is one of the greatest predictors of performance, right? So I think that's a key one.
It's not stuff. It's like the mindset.
Yeah,
mindset,
big time.
Right?
Yeah, big time. I think be around the people with the right values who understand where they're going, understand why they're getting there, and are doing it for the right reasons. All those things go hand in hand, in my opinion, in finding the right people. I think it's important to get to the root cause. If this resonates with you, this idea of upper limits, then I think it's important to get to the root cause of why it's happening. And in my experience, talking about it isn't going to work because usually, whether it's a thermostat, whether it's an identity, whether it's your nervous system, whatever it may be, usually it'll come back to an emotional root cause. And oftentimes it's not feeling good enough. Fear of rejection, wanting to get approval. It's ultimately the feeling
check
of
those boxes.
Yeah,
not
what
being
would
good
actually
enough.
happen if I actually got my goal, right?
Yeah,
What would I do then?
Not feeling worthy, all sorts. So, obviously, I'd love to say go through the alpha reset because, in my opinion, that's one of the fastest ways for you to get to the root cause of emotionally what's usually holding you back and causing you to have an upper limit. But regardless of whether it's the alpha reset, just do something to get to the emotional root cause. It doesn't involve talking because talking about it isn't going to get you there. You've got to go to the emotional root cause, feel it, express and move through the emotion. And on the other side of that is a greater sense of connection to yourself and a greater sense of freedom through which you're able to be pulled by pleasure and be clear on your values and be clear on your vision and the why and surround yourself with people. So yeah, guys, thank you for being on. An amazing conversation. It's made me reflect on a lot of things as well. So guys, thank you for joining us for another episode of the TPM Show. We'll see you next time on the TPM Show.